As the army of Mulan mortals slowly advanced, 2 days had passed. During that time, 2 groups of spell warriors had conducted a search of the army. However, Han Li was awakened by Silver Moon each time, and he was able to easily conceal himself from these low-grade spell warriors. Since the cart Han Li chose contained insignificant items, none of the Mulan mortals had bothered to check it. Once the army left the Mulan plains, Han Li stealthily took off with Silver Moon in his grasp. He took a route different from the army, heading straight in the direction of the heavenly south. With his vast spiritual sense, Han Li was able to detect any spell warriors within 50 kilometers, allowing him to easily avoid them as he smoothly made his way through the desert and into the 9 Nations Union state of Fong Yuan. The state of Fong Yuan was one of the 3 countries that was closest to the Mulan Plains. The mountains on their border were normally garrisoned with cultivators of the 9 Nations Alliance. But after Han Li spent several days inside the state of Fong Yuan, he hadn't encountered a single cultivator, but he had encountered many patrols of spell warriors. It was clear that the 9 Nations Unions had found their initial battle against the Mulan spell warriors unfavorable and decided to retreat for the time being. The true battle shouldn't have started yet. Without further thought, Han Li hurried his way through a particularly desolate area. After a smooth eventless flight for 4 days, he suddenly turned his head to look at a small obscure mountain with an expression of shock. Soon, his face changed between various different expressions. Just a moment ago, he had detected an area with fierce spiritual chi fluctuations that faintly contained vicious intent. It was clear that there was a battle between high-grade cultivators. Since a battle was taking place here, it was likely to be a cultivator fighting against a spell warrior. With some further examination, Han Li discovered that there were 5 core formation stage combatants staking their all against a nascent soul eccentric. Amongst these core formation stage combatants, there were a few with auras that Han Li found slightly familiar. After a moment of consideration, Han Li couldn't figure out who it was. After a moment of hesitation, Han Li wasn't able to suppress his curiosity and flew over. With Han Li's exceptional movement techniques, Han Li was able to cover this short distance in the blink of an eye. Once he arrived, he saw various colored lights fill the sky along with the sound of harsh explosions. The battle was greatly fierce. The 5 variously dressed core formation cultivators were currently fighting against an early nascent soul stage spell warrior. Although the 5 core formation cultivators were fighting with all their strength and were controlling their magic treasures with perfection, the yellow-robed, bald spell warrior was slowly pushing back the cultivators with circles of yellow mist. The spell warrior wore a fierce expression. Although he hadn't released his own magic treasure, his fantastical techniques and deep cultivation allowed him to easily deal with them. Were if not for the fact there was a gorgeous woman amongst the core formation cultivators, the nascent soul cultivator likely wouldn't have held back and would already finished them all off. Although Han Li found this woman familiar, his gaze focused on the fat old man amongst the cultivators. This old man was spirally with silver lightning and was controlling a huge sword magic treasure that repeatedly emitted lightning. He was the strongest amongst the group of 5. Han Li recognized the old man's appearance and cultivation art, and wore a complicated expression. He muttered, "It's him? To think that there are such coincidences in this world." After the yellow-robed cultivator battled for such a long period of time, he lost his patience and fiercely glared at the gorgeous woman. "Girl, it seems you cannot recognize my good intentions. Were it not for the fact my cultivation art requires an outstanding cultivation vessel, I wouldn't have spared you for so long. If you don't surrender yourself to me, don't blame me for being ruthless." Once he said this, he spat out a yellow feather. It glowed brilliantly and had something faintly drawn on it. The bald cultivator then took it into his hand. When the fat old man and the others saw this, their expressions vastly changed, knowing that things were from good. They clearly understood that the spell warrior had been holding back, but they didn't dare to retreat, else they would easily be picked off by the spell warrior. Their chances of survival would be even worse than fighting him together. As such, the 5 bitterly cursed in their minds and could only muster the entirety of their magic power to attack the spell warrior. For a time, the might of their magic treasures were greatly increased and they were able to forcefully beat back the yellow mist and regain some of their momentum. This infuriated the bald spell warrior. He tossed his feather into the air and spat a mist of yellow chi onto the magic treasure and began to utter incantations. The feather trembled for a moment and gently fanned in the direction of the cultivators. Suddenly, a large whistle sounded through the air and a deep yellow gale followed in the direction that the feather had fanned. In an instant, the gale turned into a 100-meter-tall tornado and completely engulfed the 5 core formation cultivators. The fearsome, earth-shaking gales caused the magic treasures to unsteadily sway. They seemed to be restricted by the gale and were incapable of breaking free. The bald spell warrior wore a bizarre smile and revealed an expression of pride. Ha ha! If you won't accept my kindness, then I will use force. How reckless! Don't expect me to stop after matters have reached this far. The bald spell warrior then grabbed the air and suddenly formed a huge hand from the yellow wings. It then made its way to grab the gorgeous woman. The spell warriors planned to first grab the woman to make sure she lived and instantly exterminate the remaining four through a full display of his power. The woman attempted to make use of her blazing flame sword magic treasure to block the large hand, but the gales had caused it to spin out of control. With no way of controlling it, she was incapable of saving herself, causing her complexion to pale. Although the four cultivators wished to rescue the woman, they were disoriented and swept away by the wind. Only the fat old man with the deepest cultivation amongst them was able to deal with it somewhat better. In his worry, he forcefully raised his hand and released a meter-long bolt of lightning to strike at the giant hand. However, the attack was completely ineffective. When the yellow hand was only 3 meters away from grabbing the woman, it suddenly disappeared. At that same moment, the yellow-robed spell warrior roared in furious alarm. The windstorm that trapped the core formation cultivator suddenly weakened before soon disappearing. It was as if what had just happened was only an illusion. The group of cultivators looked at each other with dismay and turned their gaze towards the bald spell warrior. However, he was angrily staring in a direction that was completely empty. They couldn't help but reveal astonishment. A fierce expression appeared on the spell warrior's face and he furiously shouted, "Since you've dared to break my technique, why would you so stealthily hide yourself?" He seemed to no longer pay the core formation cultivators any notice. A man's voice leisurely spoke, "It isn't that I'm hiding myself, but it's just that your cultivation is too lacking to see me. It seems your esteemed self should just recently entered nascent soul stage. You are far weaker than other spell warriors I've seen." In an azure flash of light, a youth with a common appearance appeared before them. When he saw that the 5 cultivators were caught in a desperate situation, he released an azurescent sword streak towards the feather. Once it was struck, the wind's town was easily dissolved. The 5 were initially alarmed by Han Li's appearance, but after sensing that he was at nascent soul stage, they rejoiced, knowing that their lives were saved. The female cultivator promptly saluted him from a distance and respectfully said, "Junior's name is Nai Ying. Many thanks for Senior's rescue." Nai Ying. When Han Li heard this, he couldn't help but take another look at the woman. He faintly remembered her. However, now was not the time to deal with this, and he simply waved his arm, having the woman cease her salute. The woman and the old man didn't seem to recognize him. It came as no surprise. In the past, he only met each of them once. Now that almost 200 years had passed, it wasn't odd that they didn't recognize him. With that thought, Han Li turned his gaze to the yellow-robed spell warrior and flatly said, "Since your esteemed self hasn't run, it seems you wish to take me on." When the bald spell warrior heard this, he furiously smiled and heartily laughed. "Your esteemed self is also but an early nascent soul cultivator. Your words may be bold, but I must oblige you to demonstrate your abilities." With that said, the bald spell warrior formed an incantation gesture and he flicked his finger downward, shooting out 2 shining yellow pellets. Han Li was faintly surprised by this and didn't stop him. He merely narrowed his eyes and watched with interest. The large man was inwardly delighted to see that Han Li remained idle and promptly uttered an incantation. His body was then covered with surging yellow clouds. With an imposing voice, he softly shouted, "Rise." When Han Li heard this, his heart stirred as he expectantly glanced around him, but he saw nothing appear. In his doubt, he suddenly heard faint rumbling from the ground. The rumbling soon became thunderous and world-quaking. Han Li swept his spiritual sense to the ground and revealed slight astonishment. Without any further thought, he swept his sleeve, sending 2 10-meter-long sword streaks out from his cuff down towards the sound's origin. Han Li frowned. Although the sword streaks struck, they were ineffective. With a rustle of wind, 2 40-meter-long horned yellow dragons flew out from the ground and shot towards the bald cultivator. They then surrounded the bald cultivator and continuously revolved around him as if to protect him. "This is?" Han Li was amazed to discover the 2 fearsome yellow dragons were entirely formed from earth. They appeared as if they were truly alive. This lifelike aura seemed to originate from the yellow pellet on top of their heads. It pulsed with light, releasing a demonic yellow radiance. "He. Your esteemed self will be the first to witness the might of my constrained spirit beasts. Go." The bald spell warrior furiously smiled and struck the earth dragons with yellow spell seals. The dragon subsequently charged towards Han Li with overbearing force. Han Li furrowed his brow and lightly sighed. He opened his mouth and spat out a sliver of celestial ice flames. The sliver of flames split into two even thinner flames and accurately struck the heads of each of the earth dragons. The flames crackled and instantly enveloped the earth dragons in a layer of ice. The ice sculptures stopped 10 meters in front of Han Li before dropping towards the earth. Then with a flash of azure light, there were two clear explosions. The two frozen earth dragons had been easily shattered by two sword streaks that Han Li flung. Afterwards, he raised his hand and calmly summoned the two yellow pellets into his hand. He took a glance at them before placing them into his storage pouch. Han Li leisurely said, "What other abilities do you have? Please don't hesitate to use them. I wish to see the true might of the spell warrior's spirit techniques." Silence looked over the yellow clouds for a moment as the spell warrior was shocked to the core at Han Li's effortless disposal of his two earth dragons. A moment later, the spell warrior's sullen voice suddenly left the yellow clouds. "What sect do you come from? Might I know of your distinguished name? You don't seem to match the description of any better-known cultivators. Don't tell me you also entered nascent soul stage in the last 100 years. The last question was uttered with a savage tone. I am a nameless individual. If I said my name, you wouldn't know of it. Since fellow Daoist doesn't intend to attack, I want to be polite." Han Li's expression grew sullen and he slapped the spirit beast pouch at his waist, releasing countless glistening golden flying insects into the air. They were the pure gold devouring beetles that Han Li had meticulously nurtured. This would be the first time that Han Li would be using them against an enemy. He wished to test how effective they would be against a nascent soul stage opponent. Gold devouring beetles? You actually possess them? And so many. Much to Han Li's surprise, the yellow-robed spell warrior shouted the name of these insects with a voice of terror before Han Li could order the attack. Without another word, the yellow-robed cultivator turned around and tore through the skies as a streak of yellow light. His swiftness had caused Han Li to hesitate and abandon the idea of pursuing him. He wasn't confident in being able to exterminate a nascent soul cultivator that was wholeheartedly focused on fleeing. Once a nascent soul manifested, even the lightning movement technique was lacking in speed to match it. However, the bald spell warrior was able to recognize his gold-devouring beetles despite having somewhat inferior cultivation. It was truly shocking. Although he felt somewhat puzzled, Han Li dropped the matter and recalled his still untested spirit beast pouch. Afterwards, he slowly flew towards the core formation cultivators with a calm expression. Before the Han Li drew close to them, the fat old man took the initiative to fly forward and deeply saluted him. "Many thanks for your assistance, Senior. Might Junior know your esteemed name?" "Junior is Yellow Maple Valley's Lei Wanhe. We cannot thank you enough." In addition to Nai Yang, who had introduced herself before, the others began to salute Han Li as well with gratitude and respect. The Giant Sword Sect's Shichian, Masked Moon Sect's Tang Minghua, Heavenly Imperial Fortress Qian Huan pays their respects to Senior. "Senior!" Han Li stroked his chin and wore an odd expression on his face. The fat old man was the senior martial Uncle Lei, who had exchanged medicinal herbs for pill formulas. Although he was merely observing the common customs of the cultivation world, Han Li couldn't help but find this action odd. As for the gorgeous woman named Nai Yang, he had only met her once as senior martial sister Nai before, when she had protected the Murong brothers from senior martial brother Lu back during his time at Yellow Maple Valley. Although Han Li didn't have much of a relationship with her, he had heard much of her aptitude and her beauty both external and within. Back in the past, there had been countless male disciples that had admired her. He didn't expect that after so many years, she would form a golden core. Han Li remained silent and examined both Lei Wanhe and Nai Yang with a complicated expression. As this occurred, Lei Wanhe felt puzzled. Not only did this senior appear excessively young, for some unknown reason, Lei Wanhe found his face somewhat familiar, as if he had saw him before. This had come as a shock to him and he began to feel apprehensive. As Nai Yang looked at Han Li, bewilderment suddenly appeared from deep within her eyes. Han Li was disinclined from wasting any more time with this silent display and eventually said, "It seems Martial Uncle Lei truly doesn't remember me. However, the pill formulas Martial Uncle gave to me during that year had been of great help to me." When Lei Wanhe heard Han Li call him Martial Uncle, his jaw dropped and found himself at a loss for words. But after he heard him mention pill formulas, he suddenly recalled something and began to astonishedly stutter. "Martial Uncle? Pill formulas? You're..." When the others heard this, they were also dumbstruck. This nascent soul senior had actually called Lei Wanhe Martial Uncle. This had truly sent their minds spiraling into confusion. But when Nanyang heard him, she amazedly examined Han Li once more before saying, "Your martial uncle Li's disciple, Han Li. Junior martial brother Han." The woman's voice was filled with disbelief. Han Li felt genuine surprise. "I didn't expect that fellow Daosnai would remember me." While Han Li was unknown during Qi condensation stage due to his low profile and meager cultivation, truly few knew of him. But ever since he survived the trial by blood and fire and successfully became Li Huiyuan's disciple after entering Foundation establishment, many shrewd individuals had taken notice of him. This senior martial sister Nai was one of them. Once the 6 devilish Dao sects invaded the state of Yu, his reputation surged throughout lower-grade disciples from his achievements in killing so many similar-grade devil Dao cultivators. Although she hadn't seen his face since then, he had left a deep impression on her. With Han Li's appearance exactly the same as before, she recalled the famous junior martial brother Han from the past and unconsciously shouted out his name in shock. "You truly are martial nephew Han?" Lei Wanhe felt his throat turn dry and his mind grew blank. It was said that any strange events could happen in the cultivation world. Outstanding disciples rising to the same status as a senior was a common occurrence, but for a Foundation establishment junior to suddenly reappear at nascent soul stage was something that brought an individual as experienced as Lei Wanhe into a stupor. Han Li glanced around and calmly said, "Martial Uncle Lei, there is no need to be so surprised. However, this isn't the place to talk. Let us have a chat as we travel instead." Lei Wanhe's expression wavered several times before bitterly chuckling, "I don't dare to accept the title as martial uncle. Since Senior Han has already entered nascent soul sage, I am your junior." His words still preserved the same respect from the very start. Regardless of Han Li's identity in the past, his current cultivation was far beyond his own. He didn't dare to be addressed with such an inappropriate title. The other 3 cultivators finally realized the relationship between Han Li and Wan Tianhe. After glancing at each other in dismay, weird expressions appeared on each of their faces. Han Li didn't pay this much heed. After a moment of silence, he nodded his head. "Since fellow Daoist Lei says this, I want to be polite. Let us immediately depart from here. Your speed is all rate slow, so I will be bringing you." Once that was said, Han Li slapped his storage pouch and a small, exquisite item appeared in his hand. Once he flung it into the air, a squarish item appeared before them in a flash of red light. Under control of spell seals, the wind-riding chariot quickly grew larger and appeared over 30 meters wide. "Get in the chariot!" Han Li bluntly ordered them. Lei Wanhe and the others naturally didn't have any objections and they all flew into the chariot with a blur. Once Han Li stepped onto the wind-riding chariot, he began to infuse the chariot with his spiritual power. After gently trembling for a moment, it tore through the skies as a streak of white light. With its exceeding speed, it disappeared from sight in the blink of an eye. The speed of the wind-riding chariot delighted the others. At this speed, the spell warriors wouldn't be able to pursue them, relieving them of worry that was on their minds. As Han Li drove the wind-riding chariot, he casually asked, "Fellow Taoists, the state of Fong Yuan should be already fallen into the grasp of the spell warriors. Why were you there and how did you come to be blocked by a nascent soul spell warrior? If that area weren't so remote, it wouldn't have been easy to escape even if I took action." When the 5 heard this, they glanced at each other with various expression. The clear leader of their party, Lei Wanhe, hesitated for a moment before answering, "Senior might not know this, but we didn't act out of our free will. We were under orders from the 9 Nations Union to carry out an important task. As a result, we were occupied for several days and were present during the Mulan invasion. Helpless, we could only choose a remote route and fly back. However, we encountered a few low-grade spell warriors along the way and had no choice but to kill them. But who could possibly known that there was a nascent soul spell warrior that was located nearby? Just as we finished killing the last low-grade spell warrior, we were discovered by the old eccentric and were chased down. Although we knew we weren't a match, if we scattered, we would only met our end sooner, so we could only do our utmost. It was only by a fluke that Senior Han came our way, else we would met our end." As Lei Wanhe spoke with gratitude, he examined this martial nephew Han. To tell the truth, he still felt as if all that happened was a dream. When Han Li heard this, he lost interest and indifferently grunted. A short moment later, he then asked, "Fellow Daoist Lei, is my master Li Huiyuan still doing well?" As there was no point in concealing the matter, Lei Wanhe honestly answered, "Senior Han, junior martial brother Li died 100 years ago in the war with the Mulan spell warriors. As for his wife, she wasn't able to form a golden core and reached the end of her lifespan. Han Li was slightly shaken by his words and revealed a trace of sadness. He then asked, were my fellow martial brothers and sisters able to form a golden core? Lei Wanhe sighed and said, no, although 3 of junior martial brother Li's disciples had exceptional aptitude and entered false core stage, they weren't fated to form a golden core. Han Li grew silent for a moment. The appearances of Yu Kuan, Song Meng, Zhong Wenyang, and the others appeared through his mind. Past events slowly began to appear. A moment later, he took a deep breath. Since his martial brothers and sisters were unable to form a golden core, he didn't further ask about them. It was likely that they died during meditation. His time spent at Yellow Maple Valley seemed as if it had all happened in an old dream. At that moment, Niyang suddenly said, Senior Han, would you happen to be interested in rejoining Yellow Maple Valley? Han Li raised his brow and immediately answered, return to Yellow Maple Valley? I have no such interest. I've already become an elder of the Heavenly Tao Alliance's Drifting Cloud sect, and I am satisfied there. Disappointment appeared from Niyang's expression and Lei Wanhe's expression wavered. As for the other 3, they didn't dare to speak as they were unfamiliar with Han Li. After a moment of hesitation, Niyang then asked, would Senior happen to recognize Xiao Kuiya? Han Li was stunned for a moment. He asked with an odd expression, Xiao Kuiya? Of course I do, you know that little girl? At that same moment, the appearance of that young, strange-spirited girl came to mind. Han Li had a deep impression of the young girl he had recommended to join Yellow Maple Valley. But soon after, he recalled the small old man that had accepted her as a disciple, senior martial brother Ma. When Han Li recalled him, he felt a trace of sadness. That small old man couldn't have formed a golden core given his age, but he was the one who Han Li shared the deepest friendship with at Yellow Maple Valley. Odds were that he already passed away. With both feigned annoyance and delight, she faintly smiled and said, little girl. Junior martial sister Xiao is no longer some little girl. She is already married and entered core formation stage several tens of years ago. Once Han Li recovered from his surprise, he smiled. Oh? She also entered core formation. Now that is surprising. Niying gently said, I have heard junior martial sister Xiao speak several times about how senior drew her into the sect. Junior martial sister Xiao always felt deep gratitude and concern for senior Han. Han Li's smile faded away and he insipidly said, at the time, I simply introduced her to senior martial brother Ma because her aptitude was good, nothing more. It is now only a matter of the past. Niyang and Lei Wanhe could only bitterly smile at each other in silence at her failed efforts in an attempt to make Han Li rejoin the sect. As for the reason why Han Li was unwilling to rejoin, the two could guess. During the year the core disciples joined the 9 Nations Union, since Han Li wasn't amongst them because he was but a minor Foundation establishment disciple, he was grouped up to be bait and was abandoned. It was no wonder why he felt so detached towards Yellow Maple Valley and had no intention of returning. As the two had nothing better to say, Han Li suddenly asked the middle-aged masked moon cultivator, did you have a female cultivator by the name of Nangong Wan? How is she now? Han Li's voice suddenly grew gloomy. The middle-aged man named Tang Minghua was surprised and he soon respectfully replied, Senior knows martial aunt Nangong? She is currently overseeing the sect and is doing well. In Han Li's shock, he wasn't able to conceal a trace of joy. Martial aunt? She already entered nascent soul stage. Martial aunt Nangong successfully entered nascent soul stage over 100 years ago and she is now an elder of our sect. Is senior an old friend of martial aunt Nangong? Han Li sighed and his eyes became dim. Old friend? It could be considered so. I received great kindness from your martial aunt in the past, and I've always wanted to meet her again. It's a shame that I was occupied with so many matters over the year and I've never had the opportunity. Hee. Although martial aunt Nangong rarely sees guests, senior should be able to easily see her. In 3 months, martial aunt Nangong will marry the Flowing Mind sect's elder Wei, and their Tao companion ceremony will officialize them as pair cultivators. This celebration originally only invited high-grade cultivators of the 9 Nations Union, but since senior is her old friend, he will certainly. Han Li felt his mind buzz and he couldn't hear anything else the middle-aged man said. He suddenly faced the masked moon sect cultivator and coldly asked, Tao companion ceremony? Yes, she plans on marrying elder Wei Lycan of the Flowing Mind sect, who formed a nascent soul 300 years ago and possesses profound abilities. He is a cultivation genius who didn't come from the heavenly south. Both of our sects spent much effort to make this matter possible. Han Li's icy expression frightened the middle-aged cultivator. All kinds of strange thoughts began to well up inside him, but under Han Li's freezing gaze, he couldn't help but continue to speak. Lei Wanhe and the others revealed an odd expression. Even an idiot could tell that the relationship between Han Li and Nangong Wan wasn't so simple. Why else would Han Li have such a strong reaction upon hearing this? Much to the others' surprise, Han Li's icy expression lasted only a moment more before suddenly disappearing. With a gentle tone, he said, "There is no need for fellow Daoist Tang to be afraid. I have no evil intentions. I merely heard that an old love of mine is about to become someone else's woman, and I became somewhat restless. Now that I know of this matter, I will naturally have to celebrate my good friend's ceremony." The middle-aged cultivator sighed in relief at seeing Han Li so calm and repeatedly uttered words of welcome. However, Han Li only replied with a slight smile. The others in the chariot were also relieved. After all, the 6 sects of Yu were now practically one united existence. They didn't wish for anything to happen to one another. Following this, Han Li casually asked a few more questions related to the 6 sects of Yu. Since the matters weren't important, the 5 were able to answer all of them. But when he heard that the Yellow Maple Valley ancestor Lingu had reached the end of his lifespan, Han Li frowned for just a moment and quickly unfurrowed his brow as if he hadn't heard this. Han Li suddenly recalled something and asked, "Ah yes, your martial aunt Nangong should have a younger cousin by the name of Nangong Bing. She should also be a cultivator of the Masked Moon sect." The middle-aged cultivator seemed confused and asked, "Nangong Bing? Senior must be heard wrong. Martial aunt Nangong was always a solitary figure. I've never heard of a younger cousin. Is Senior not mistaken?" When Han Li heard this, he was dumbfounded. After taking a deep breath, he urgently asked, "Nangong Bing should be been a female core formation cultivator of your sect. Could it be that you don't remember?" Tang Minghua wryly smiled. "If this person truly belongs to our sect, this junior would definitely know of it. I can pledge with certainty that there is no such woman in our sect." With an astonished expression, Lei Wanhe couldn't help but interrupt, "Fellow Daoist Tang speaks the truth. We would know if such a core formation cultivator existed in the Masked Moon sect. Where did Senior come to learn of this person?" "It's nothing. I merely had a misunderstanding." Although Han Li said this, he was flabbergasted and appeared to be at a loss. Han Li now knew that Nangong Bing wasn't the cousin of Nangong Wan, but was Nangong Wan herself with the use of some appearance alterations. It was no wonder why she hadn't treated him so ruthlessly or why she had such a queer expression when they departed. After that, Han Li completely lost interest in further discussion and simply dropped the chariot forward with a gloomy expression. When the others saw that this senior Han wasn't in a good mood, they didn't dare to carelessly chat. For a time, the wind-riding chariot was completely silent. Less than half a day later, Han Li stopped the wind-riding chariot at some nameless mountain. Han Li stood up and calmly said, "We will have to part here. This place is only a day away from the border of the state of Fong Yuan. It should be safe here. I have matters that I must attend to and I cannot continue to keep you company." Lei Wanhe and the others didn't dare to say anything else and simply thanked Han Li once more for saving their life before flying out of the wind-riding chariot. Han Li didn't say a single word more and promptly turned the chariot before disappearing off the horizon in the blink of an eye. The older Heavenly Imperial Fortress cultivator surnamed Chen saw that the wind-riding chariot had disappeared from sight and couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Daoist Lei, is it true that Senior Han was once a disciple of your Yellow Maple Valley and was your martial nephew in the past?" Lei Wanhe frowned and annoyedly said, "What, do you think I'm someone who speaks empty words?" Although his life had been saved by Han Li, his past junior's cultivation now vastly exceeded his own and he became a genuine senior. Given how careful he had to be, he couldn't help but be in a bad mood. He. There is no need for Brother Lei to be angry. I simply found it odd. If fellow Daoist spoke truthfully, Senior Han should be around the same age as fellow Daoist Nai. Fellow Daoist Nai, how long have you been cultivating? Cultivator Qian asked earnestly. As if realizing what he asked, Nai Yang answered with a changed expression, "I cultivated for 200 years before reaching early core formation stage." Cultivator Qian rubbed his chin and sternly said, "It seems Senior Han spent only 200 years before condensing a nascent soul. Do you know what this means?" The giant sword sect cultivator couldn't help but shout in surprise, "Could it be Brother Qian means?" Cultivator Qian solemnly said, "That's right. It is quite possible this person may reach deity transformation stage. It had been tens of thousands of years since this last happened. Although cultivators who reach deity transformation stage soon disappear from this world, each of them were unrivaled in the short time they were here. The entire heavenly south, be they righteous, devilish, or even neutral, all unite during this time, as there is none capable of withstanding an early deity transformation stage cultivator.